I am an expert in bringing in sacredness and divine intimacy into our relationships and our connections. And my specialty is tantric bodywork and activation of our life force energies to help people feel more awakened and liberated in their bodies, more connected with their hearts and their souls, and more embodied in their expressions and their desires when it comes to sexuality and intimacy. There's a lot of distortions around what is Tantra in our modern world today. And it's the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing is because I want to break through the paradigm and get out of the simple mind focus on sexuality and help people expand it into more of like a self-awareness program. Tantra to me is a weaving of different modalities, different practices, different tools into a creation of your own kind to help you feel more liberated and enlightened. Tantra is the path towards enlightenment. It has nothing to do with massages, nothing to do with sex, nothing to do with what the modern world says it to be. It's an ancient practice where yogis would sit in meditations. They would practice specific visualizations, breath work, specific techniques to feel more attunement in their bodies and more sensitivity and awareness of their world, as well as their connection with their source, with creation. And so my work and my tantric work is the weaving of my studies of yoga, breath work, holistic healing, energy vibrational healing, weaving it with the sacred sexuality, with the intimacy, with the relationship and communication, weaving it all together to create an experience where clients can learn more about themselves, where they can bring tools of relating and communicating into their relationships if they're in one, or they can learn new tools and practices that they can practice with their partners that they will have. And so it's a weaving of different modalities that allows one to feel more connection, first of all, to their body. The path of Tantra for me is all through the body, whereas a lot of spiritual modalities help you focus on like the outer space, like traveling out. Tantra is all about coming back in. And as my girlfriend likes to say, landing into the throne of our bodies. So then from the throne of our bodies, we can be more conscious, more present, and more aware in all aspects of our lives, including our sexuality, our intimacy, and our relationship with others and our relationship with God.
Very beautifully said.
Thank you.
What drew you to this path and this profession?
Yeah. Well, the path of Tantra actually found me. Where I began my journey was with holistic wellness and health. Many years ago, my grandmother got Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer, and it was a very challenging time for our family. And I already knew I wanted to understand like what happens in the body when cancer takes over. And so I started learning about the impact of our food and all the toxins that are in our foods, the quality of the water that we drink, all the minerals that are missing from the water, all the essential nutrients that are really missing from our food today. And then when we pair all that with sugars and with salts and with, colorants and things that are made to like plastic materials, they deteriorate our bodies from the inside out. And so my journey started with learning about the health and wellness and what I'm eating, what I'm drinking. And then it took me through a journey into discovering yoga, which is the path of movement. I started learning about my connection with my breath and how you can actually energize yourself without any psychedelics, without any drugs, without anything, just through the power of your breath. And then eventually my journey led me into learning more about sexuality. I had a partner at the time with whom I really wanted to become more open sexually. I was never taught about really a liberated woman, like what did it mean to be a liberated woman and be empowered in your sexuality. And so I started learning about conscious sex practices. And eventually Tantra just it was like an encompassing field that Tantra is like everything. So all those little pieces eventually led me into bringing more of these tantric practices into my partnership, learning from YouTube, from books, from different teachers. And I started to weave the health and the food and the yoga and the breath work and the conscious sexual practices all together within my partnership, which is Tantra. And so the path in a way found me. It led me into Miami, where I reside now. And I was infiltrating the field of sex work with an intention to bring in light and awareness. And so now I am in the field of conscious sexuality and education, and really teaching men that it's not just the sex that they want. They think they want the sex, but really they're craving connection and depth of being seen, of being heard, and being acknowledged. And that is what the path of Tantra supports us with. Yeah.
You said a few things that I want to go back to. Well, first and foremost, I've interviewed hundreds of members from LiveJasmin at this point, and hundreds of models on the platform. And what you just said about the fact that many men in particular, they think they want sex, but what they're actually seeking is something deeper. I have seen that to be true, because in using the lens of LiveJasmin as the example, when someone is paying for an interaction, that right there should tell you it's not just about sexual content, because that is free online. It's about the connection. And I have seen that most of the men I've interviewed, they have had a relationship with a model for the longest was 18 years, but on average, it's like 10 years, 15 years, this same model. They have like deeply bonded with this person. And many of the models say that the members who come to the site are missing something in their life, and they are seeking it through the platform and the model. And it is much deeper than just sex.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the discovery that we as individuals go through. For me, the weaving of sexuality and spirituality is the root of my work. I'm very deep into the esoterics and wanting to understand really the roots of who we are and why we're here, and to bring more purpose and intention into my life. And so when I started bringing in more of these spiritual understanding into my sexual union, I've discovered that our sex is really the closest we feel to God. And when you're in that state of orgasmic experience, you are so enveloped in that present moment where nothing matters. And I think that's what a lot of clients are seeking. They're wanting to be fully present in the moment, in that connection state. And in that moment, they're not thinking about work or bills or projects or all the stressors of the world that really create density in the body. And another way that sex is being used by a lot of men is to like dispel and get rid of extra energy that they have. So what I want to do is actually want to teach men how we can cultivate all that extra energy towards purpose, towards a more meaningful expression in your day-to-day, whether it is in your business or whether it's in your relationship or whether it is in your sexuality. And so, yeah, I'm really happy that you guys have this platform where people can explore these conversations, because I believe we are going through a sexual revolution globally right now. And it's really powerful that we have these topics discussed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Something else you said that I want to go back to was that you want to bring consciousness into sex work. Can you talk to me more about what you meant by that?
When I begin to look at sexuality as something very sacred, this is what I mean. When our genitals come together, we are literally in a merger. This is the most closest you can be to one another. And then when we begin to mix our fluids, fluid bonding, our fluids carry information. They carry our memories, our emotions, our feelings, our past, right? And so from my experience in the past, like when I would engage with men who did not have my bestest intentions, I would feel that energy afterwards for days, sometimes for years. And we women, just to drop some fun fact of the day, it is said that women carry the energy of the men that they have intercourse with for up to 7 years, right? So thinking back to all of that. So that's just one portion. Another portion is women in the field are not considering their bodies as sacred temples. And when they are engaging with men that strictly see them as an object to masturbate into, there is a disconnect, right? So when the body is being treated simply as a tool, there isn't that intention, there isn't that adoration and devotion that our bodies are meant to experience when it comes to true love making. And there's a difference between making love and fucking, right? Like completely different energies. And so what the intention that I desire is for women in the field to get really empowered for their bodies and to claim their pleasure and their sexuality as a gift that they get to share with another man. But first, there should be some sort of an opening and a conversation so that men understand that, you know, the body is sacred and we need to treat it as sacredly. And when men hire women without that awareness and without that education, and I've been in this situation where literally men just use your body as a tool for penetration, right? And so it's an empty experience. It's icky. It disconnects you from the body and the sacredness of our womb, which can hold so much bliss, so much medicine, and so much pleasure. And so there is like this traumatization that happens in the field when women give into these experiences, either out of fear, out of money, you know, that's what I'm saying, when it's not like integrated in the heart space. And yes, there's also a lot of facilitators of this work who love what they do. They love it. It's part of their journey. And it like, you know, it's what lights them up. And so when I say to bring consciousness into the thing, into the experience, is to consider the fact that the body is sacred and you get to choose who enters it and how they enter it, so that we're not creating more trauma in the body, but rather we're healing and liberating one another. And this is something that men just simply need to be educated about, because most of them are simply looking at sex as an outlet for release and an outlet to experience connection and intimacy. But they don't have the education, and most women don't say no. Most women don't have the voice to say, no, this doesn't feel good. No, please slow down. Hey, this feels like it's a little painful. Can we change? And a lot of women like take on the pains, and that creates like collective trauma. And so I want to bring consciousness, consent, boundaries, conversations about desires, wants, and needs before any intimacy happens. And so that we can create more healthier dynamics in all fields, including the sex work. Yeah.
It's interesting because, again, obviously using LiveJasmin as the example, through the lens of this interview, because that's where we're from. You know, the models that I have interviewed that are really making a difference in people's lives, they're in that place that you just described, where it's more of a heart-centered place, and they see their work as meaningful and purposeful. And all of them, most of them, we have what we call our Jasmine millionaires. They are millionaires from camming. Those models I've interviewed who are millionaires, I always ask them, well, what does it take to be successful? And one of the things that every single one of them has said to me is, I don't do anything I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. There is that respect for themselves, and they almost command a respect to some degree from whoever they're engaging with. Obviously, this work is not physical. When I say it's not physical work, I mean the model member never touch, obviously. But that place that you talked about, which is more heart-centered and not just, oh, I just need to get this done with, or I just need to do this to please this person, that's not helping anyone. But when people come from that place of purpose, that can be very healing. And I have interviewed members who have said that their relationships with models have helped them get through severe depression, have helped them get through the death of a family member, have helped them. One member, he had suffered a severe heart attack, and one of the leftover effects of that is that he gets really bad panic attacks now. Mm-hmm. And he said every time he talks to this model, his anxiety just dissipates. It is so grounding and healing for him.
Yeah.
And again, it's because she's grounded in herself, that she can hold that space for someone who's having a severe anxiety attack, you know?
Absolutely. And the term models, I think, is like the modern day terminology. If we want to go back into the history of the priestesses and the real temple work, that's what it's all about. The warriors would come back from the wars, and before going back into their tribes, to their families, they would be sent to the temples where they would stay and they would heal with the women, and they would heal their hearts and they would heal their war wounds before they can return. And so the women actually hold so much grace and so much power simply by being in their authentic self expression. And the more we can remember our power as women, you know, we're coming out of a really weird times over the last 100 years. And I'm in my own journey feeling a reclamation of power, reclamation of my pleasure. Even the terminologies like sluts and whore, you know, we're bringing sacredness. You know, the term whore actually comes from the Eye of Horus, you know, the Egyptian, the Isis priestesses, the lineage of the ancient temple priestesses who hold the key towards healing at multidimensional levels. And so, of course, there is no need for any physical penetration or exchange because it's all felt through the energetic field and the emotional body that women can support men that are going through challenging times. And so I love it. I get so jazzed up about just hearing these stories and the transformations that women have on men. And men are warriors. You know, this world is so tough. They have to do things that are sometimes very out of alignment. You know, survival is really huge. And a lot of men are doing things that are against that like grain of their own integrity. And so when they connect with women who can hold that sturdy feminine essence of healing and grace, of course, anxiety and depression and worries, they go away. Because in a way, she can just kind of like absorb. You know, women, we absorb. We have the womb, which receives. So we, in a way, receive that energy and we can transmute it into light and into love so that we're not carrying that. But when women are doing things unconsciously, instead of transmuting it, they're holding on to it. And that's where the shadow stuff comes in. Yeah.
I love how you brought in the fact that warriors would go to temples and basically spend time with women who would help them heal.
Yeah.
Do you know of any particular, like specific cultures or civilizations where that happened, or is it just kind of ancient times?
Greece, Egypt, you know, the Celtic cultures. You know, there's a lot of different studies. I have a book actually called The Ancient Goddess Wisdom, and it's like this thick, and it talks about the times of matriarchs. And it talks about the times when women were ruling the societal norms and how priestesses were revered. You know, even going back to ancient India, in the Tantric Hinduism, there's temples with all these like Kama Sutra like figures, and the temples were created where the people can go to and they can connect and they can work with the priestesses, but it had nothing to do with sex and the sex postures. It had a lot to do with actually transmuting that lust and that desire into more heart space and connection based. And so the work is very ancient, and a lot of women are waking up nowadays feeling that Shakti power, that serpent power moving through us. And it's in our blood. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, where a lot of the work they were doing was transmuting the lust, the desire into more heart energy and emotional energy, because that is what I see a lot of models on LiveJasmin doing specifically, where these men may come in initially because they want something, a very sexual experience. Mm-hmm. Then something happens, like there is some connection that is made. Yeah. And 15 years later, they're talking to the same person and they're not stripping down and getting naked all the time. It's, how's your mom doing? What did the dog eat for dinner? It's really fascinating to see. And the Kinsey Institute has done a lot of research on LiveJasmin's user base, and they found that the models who make the most money, and it's a lot of money, like I said, they are millionaires, the things that they were talking about were less explicit. It was more about that heart-centered space, that they were allowing this person to be heard, to be seen, to share. And one of the things that I think, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, one of the things that I think bonds a lot of members so strongly to models, to where they are together, or, you know, having this relationship for 15, 20 years, is when they share these vulnerable, secret parts of themselves, no matter what it is. It could be something sexual, it could be a fantasy, it could be whatever. And the model holds that space and accepts them. If they accept that hidden part of them that that person thinks the world would judge or leave them for. I think that's one of the things that bonds them so deeply to this person.
Vulnerability is huge. Yeah, absolutely. And especially for men who don't have that outlet at the house. I'm finding when I work with couples, one thing I find is that there's really bad communication, and women are not really willing to listen to the men. There's a lot of interrupting, a lot of finishing sentences, a lot of assumptions and judgments. And I'm literally like in this session with both of them experiencing that, and I'm calling it out. I'm like, hey, let him finish his sentence. And what happens when he doesn't feel heard, he kind of like nags at her, and he'll say things that like put her down or make her feel insecure. So like she kind of goes quiet. And the whole thing just gets distorted, because when we can't be like in our hearts and in our truth, then there is no space for vulnerability. And so then, of course, the sexual connection is just going to feel like physical friction connection, and it's not going to fulfill you to the depths that you're really craving to have that connection. And so I see our relationships as being one of the biggest platforms for our spiritual growth and evolution. And this is why I'm so focused on, first of all, myself as a woman, getting rid of all the crap from my mom and my grandmas and all of that conditioning and all the ways that they were, and learning to soften and learning to not have such strict expectations on men, because I'm seeing there's challenges. I'm seeing how hard it is to be a man and to provide for a big family and to have the fancy cars and the house and the yachts and all whatnot. And it's like the more they acquire, the more of that weight men feel on their shoulders. And when they don't have that outlet at home to serenade and to rejoice, they will search for that somewhere else. And that's where these women and the models and escorts and practitioners of this work come in, because we've learned how to hold space, for ourselves. You can only do that if you hold it for yourselves. So then we can offer that space to them. And yeah, I'm happy that people can find the support, because it's also not just a regular therapy. You know, hiring like a counselor, sometimes you can't access certain conversations. Whereas with a sex worker, sex therapist, intimacy coach, you can go to the depths of the shadows. You can go into your deepest, darkest desires and bring them into light and just be that witness. And being in the kink and BDSM field, like, to me, nothing is out of the ordinary anymore. I'm also polysensual, poly community. So like all cards are open at this point. So I'm just able to just give it to me. Tell me what you got. There's nothing bad about any of you. Let's bring the light into that. And light, what is light? It's just awareness, right? It's simply just having awareness. Yeah.
When you're working with clients, would you say you work mainly with individuals or couples, or a good mixture of both?
A mixture of both. I work mostly with men, and then also a big part couples.
That's really interesting that you work mostly with men.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start there. What would you say are some of the main challenges that you work with them on?
Yeah. So outside of the body work doesn't really have a lot of mentoring or coaching. Outside of the hands-on healing work, when I go into more conversation-based, challenges that men bring up to me is lack of self-esteem, not having enough awareness of their sexual performance, not being able to last as long as they would like with their sexual partners, feeling like they can't satisfy their woman as much as she wants to be. So there's a thread of self-esteem, like self-esteem has been like tangled up with, is what I've noticed. Beyond like physical issues like premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunctions, or performance anxiety, beyond all of that is like self-esteem, and then also education and empowerment of sexuality, because nobody teaches us how to make love. Men learn how to have sex or how to fuck online from what they're watching, but there isn't much education on what is actually like pleasure journey with a woman look like, beyond just sexual intercourse. And I think this is another reason why I'm doing the work of education, is because I want to give men tools for how to be better lovers so that they can have more confidence. Because if you're watching porn and you're expecting yourself to perform to the level of these porn stars, and then you go to your woman and, she's not in her sex goddess performance, and you're trying to like hold your 5 minutes hardcore, yeah, you're going to feel crappy about yourself. And so education, I think, is so key before we can come to a place of empowerment. Like me as a woman, I didn't know I can have clitoral orgasm, G-spot orgasm, cervical orgasm, breastgasms. Nobody taught me that. I was 28 years old when I had my first like cervical orgasm. Nobody taught me that. And so imagine women going their entire lives without knowing what is possible. Same thing for men, right? And so education is really important. But those challenges with the self-esteem, I find as the biggest thread along the clients.
If you could give one message first to every woman in the world about human sexuality, human connection, femininity, what would that message be?
All right. So I was trying to bring one in there, but there's quite a few. So I'm going to give you two. Okay. So the message for women, the biggest one, is to connect to your own body and to your own pleasure. Do not expect for a man to know how to get you off if you don't know how to get yourself off. Okay. Number one, self-pleasure is probably the most easiest and the most pleasurable way to really connect to your body and to expand your capacity to feel. So then when you are with a man, first of all, you know how to get yourself there. And second of all, you can guide him. And when you can guide him, you can empower him. And when you can empower him, you can raise his self-esteem. And then both of you can have a more fulfilling and juicier experience. Yeah. And then number two, watch your communication. What are you saying and how are you saying it? Is what you're saying to your man uplifting him, encouraging him, and inspiring him to be a better man for you? Or are you talking down and dismissing him and neglecting him and bringing him into less confidence? So those two for me, I think if we can weave the pleasure and connection to the body with intentional communication and speaking about our desires, wants, and needs, we can have a much more fulfilling relationship in our bedroom and outside of the bedroom. Something interesting that I've learned about the heart space when it comes to men and women. So the heart is a place from where we give love, but our womb, our yoni, our vagina, is where we receive. For men, it's the opposite. Men's genitals is their penetrative pole, but it's their heart that receives. And so men and women have different ways of receiving love, right? And so for men, through sex is how he can open up his emotional body, how he can go into those vulnerable states. Whereas for a woman, she needs to be activated in her heart first. And so it's like we're in this like cat chasing its own tail when we don't have that awareness. And so for me now, before any sort of lovemaking or any penetration, my lovers know I need to be touched in my heart, my neck, my collarbone. I need to be really connected to you here. And sometimes if I feel disconnection during sex, like I'll let my partner know, like, hey, I need more heart. So he'll come up and we'll do like some heart to heart. Because the body is so intuitive. And this is why like I bring spirituality and esoterics and all this ancient knowledge, because first of all, it's ancient. You know, this is something that we just were never taught because the system is designed for us to fail. I'm sorry, but it is. The system is designed for us to be robots, to be disconnected, to be following the script of whoever's the script. But when we come back to ourselves, to our own truth, to our bodies, to our hearts, to our genitals, we can truly live a more intuitive life and avoid situations that might not be the best for us. And so the journey really is about awakening and remembering and learning who we truly are and how we can operate to the best capacity so that we can thrive collectively, all together. Yeah.
I want to ask you now the same question I asked you for women. If you could give a message to every man in the world about human sexuality or connection, what would that message be?
Yeah. Number one, and it's so strong, and I say it all the time, stop the porn. Please stop the porn. Pornography has been just such a big fail in our society when it comes to sexuality and its education. And it's really distorting the psyche of the man when it comes to sexuality. So I say stop the porn completely and then see how your relationships will change. That's like number one. And it's a huge, huge for me. For women, especially, you know, when your male is constantly in that psyche of pornography, she can't connect to you because you're in this fantasy world. And so for men to really come back into their bodies, get with your woman and explore her body, explore pleasure in softer and more gentle ways. But we can't be comparing a real woman's experience to what the porn stars are doing on TV. We just can't. And we can't have those expectations going into the bedroom because you will be disappointed. You know, women's pleasure is so beautiful when it opens up, you know, and you let it bloom. But in porn, they don't teach you about foreplay, how long it takes to actually for a woman to get turned on and aroused, how to actually stimulate her to help her reach an orgasm. You know, many women can't orgasm from just penetration. They need to be activated in their other ways. And so stop the porn and perhaps ask the woman that you're with, what does she like? How does she like it? Like communicate. And that's another thing, communication. Communicating with our partners about our needs and our wants and our fears. And that will create more space for vulnerability. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because I always ask members of LiveJasmin, in your perspective, what is the difference between porn and something like camming? And they always say it's the fact that you're dealing with a real person. It's still a real experience. You have that interaction. And again, these are human beings. They're not acting on a screen for a movie like porn is, more or less. And they will tell you, I'm not comfortable with that. And so a lot of members have said they've actually learned even how to talk to a woman because the models will teach them, you're not going to talk to me like that just because you're paying for this private. And I love that, you know, and so many members have said it's almost been like educational for them, maybe to help get them out of that. They might be going to a cam site thinking, oh, I'm going to get some type of porn experience or something. And it's like, no, you're going to get a real experience. You might get to act out your fantasy or whatever the case is, but you're still dealing with a human being. And I think that is personally one of the biggest things I just see when I look around the world is that we've lost so much of our humanity and we're not really allowing people the space to be human anymore for some reason.
Yeah.
So wherever we can get that back and remind each other we're all humans and we still have our humanity with us And that needs to be honored, I think is important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that the girls are educating. And like I said earlier, consent and boundaries is something that is not taught in porn or schools or really anywhere. And being part of the kink and BDSM scene, it's like the foundation of conscious relating. Hey, is this okay? Hey, may I touch you here? Does this feel good? Like just communication. It all really goes back to communicating, but also knowing what to communicate. Right. And so I'm so happy that the girls are educating these men and helping them bring these tools into their lives. That's wonderful. So the fact that a woman has the space of void within her body that literally grows and creates life, through which then the spirit, the consciousness comes through, that in itself shows us that the creator have given this power to women. And for so many years, women were thrown off their power and their sexuality was demonized because that's their power. And it's feared by men who don't understand it and who want to kind of shut them down. And so, yeah, I've read so many books around, the witch hunts and the women that were literally like suppressed for just being in their femininity by the Christian church, because church did not want women to be in power, because women have the awareness of caring for all beings. By nature, we are nurturing, we are caregivers. By nature, we magnify anything and amplify anything that is given to us. And so they suppressed our power and they put the church and the men into skirts. Okay, they put men into skirts. Let's just bring that in there. And they put men into power. And now in our society, whereas back in the day, we had red tents and babies would come into this earth with women surrounding them. The woman would bring the baby on earth. Now the world has distorted all of that. And now babies come into life in hospitals, sterile rooms, into the hands of male doctors, being circumcised, which to me is a whole another distortion of male sexuality, probably another conversation we can jump on. And so I know that the creatress of all things is an androgynous being, but on this planet right now, women have the gift to bring life onto this earth. And simply by that fact alone, I think the patriarchy was threatened. And so they shut it down. And so, we're coming out of the dark age, and we are kind of still in this dark age of women reclaiming their power, but we're still got a long way to go. But ultimately, our sexuality, our essence, our creativity is our power, because we are the birthers of realities. And they did not want for us to birth our reality because they had their own dark agenda and their own propaganda that they were forcing within the last 2,000 years, as you see where the world is now. And so women are slowly rising into power, just in different ways. And I think the field of sex work is where a lot of women are finding their truth, their power, and their voice. And that's where we get to infiltrate the field with our wisdom and to bring these men online into more conscious ways of being and relating. And that's going back to what I mean when I say I'm here to bring light into the shadows of the field of sex work so that we can really grow together in power, in respect, in recognition of each other, because we need each other. I love men. I love men so much. I literally started my entire Instagram, Sacred Muse Tantra, to educate men about sexuality, because a long time ago, I was sick and tired of having bad sex. They didn't know what they were doing, and I was being so frustrated. And so I'm like, we have to do something about it. And so I believe that every goddess in her own way is shining her light and is making changes in her own way within her community and the men around her. And slowly but surely, we'll be rising out of the dark age into the new Aquarian age, where things will be very different. But until then, we're holding the torch of love.
Amen.
Yes.
This has been a beautiful interview. Is there anything about your work, human sexuality or connection, camming that we didn't talk about, but you want to share?
Mm. You know, I think the fact that I did say stop the porn, that was like the really strong point for me. I think if we can be more mindful, if men can be more mindful of pornography and how it affects and distorts their psyche, we can have some bigger shifts in our lives. And I also say, you know, if you're finding all this time for porn, most likely you're not living in your purpose, because men that are in purpose online, they don't have time for that. You know, they make love with their woman, they make love with their partners. Porn doesn't have space in their mind. And so I'm a big advocate for either conscious, bourgeois, female produced pornography, which exists. I'm all about that. But I'm more about becoming sexually empowered and liberated without the distortions of those places. So I feel pretty good that I had a space to say that. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
My final question for you is, from your experience, your perspective, what are our next steps, collectively or individually, in building a more sexually well and healthy society?
Sexually well and healthy, are we talking in realms of like sexual health or sexual expression?
I would say being more like sexually fulfilled in a healthy way, not like physical health or anything like that, but more sexually conscious.
Yeah. Yeah. I say we need to start with exploring our own bodies and our own pleasures and knowing what feels good and being able to communicate that to our partners and really learning the tools of communication of things. I find that a lot of people don't have a library of emotions to really describe how they're feeling. So really learning who you are, how you're feeling, how does your heart feeling? Because sometimes our heart says yes, but our genitals say no. And so having that like internal awareness so that when we do interact in the world, we can interact from that grounded and centered place, knowing ourselves so that our boundaries don't get crossed or we don't cross other people's boundaries. And so their recommendation is to go inwards, to get to know who you are, what makes you feel good, what you don't like, and being able to have these real and vulnerable conversations with people that you plan to have sexual engagements with, and really have the conversations beforehand. You know, we need to be talking before sex so that we can have a more fulfilling sex. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure to connect and share some of my wisdom and knowledge on this platform. So thank you.